Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with Christine from Simply by Christine, and we're really excited to share with you some cooking methods that you can use to reduce your food waste. So on Christine's channel, we filmed a video about some other different ways to reduce your food waste, so definitely check that video out after you watch this one, and let's just hop right in. Use your compost to make package-free veggie broth. This tip is all about getting the most bang for your buck from your veggies and being resourceful. It honestly couldn't be easier. For this recipe, you'll just need water and food scraps. I like to store my food scraps that I'm going to use to make broth in a separate little bag in my freezer just to make it easier. You don't need to completely cover the food scraps with water because they will shrink down once they get going. So parts of peppers, carrots minus the actual greens, cauliflower, onion, broccoli, celery, garlic cloves, tomato cores, you get the idea. Whatever you have on hand will most likely work. I found this recipe from the Zero Waste Chef, who is a wealth of knowledge and is linked below. As you can see, I put this on the stove and covered it for around 30 minutes, checking on it and stirring it every once in a while. By the end of the 30 minutes, the veggies had lost their color and the broth was rich and vibrant. After the broth had cooled a bit, I used a funnel with a small strainer attachment to transfer the broth into a jar to freeze. There's more info about freezing in glass at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that.
The second method to help reduce food waste is adding salt or sugar as a preservative. This method of food preservation is commonly used in canned goods or jams, but today we'll be making a simple sweet and sour pickle recipe from my book, which helps vegetables last for weeks. We started off by slicing 1 cucumber and 2 carrots for this recipe. You can also add a small daikon radish in the mix if you'd like. The sliced veggies were then placed straight into a clean glass jar. Next, we poured 8 ounces of vinegar and 8 ounces of water into the jar, enough to cover the vegetable slices. If you're using a different size jar, make sure the water to vinegar ratio is 1:1. 4 ounces of sugar went in next. You can add more or less sugar depending on how sweet you want your pickles to be, and you can taste test the liquid after mixing it to see if it needs to be adjusted to your liking. To dissolve the sugar, we simply closed the jar and shook it around until most of the sugar disappeared. We then added 1 more pinch of salt and some chili flakes for extra flavor, but feel free to add any other spices that you prefer. The pickled veggies should sit in their brine for at least 1 day to absorb flavor and should last a few weeks in the fridge. I like these pickled Asian veggies best in a tofu banh mi sandwich or as a side dish with a stir fry, and hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do.
The third method you can use to reduce your food waste is to utilize your freezer. Freezing food keeps bacteria away and can end up saving you time and money because you can make a big batch of things once, like beans or soup, and use them over the coming weeks. Today we're making a big pot of soup using some leftover produce that I had from last week's camping trip, and I actually have a video coming up soon about how I cook when I'm camping, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. I'll include a similar recipe on my coordinating blog post for this soup, but the idea here is to really just use what you have in the fridge before it goes bad, so the options are endless. Here you can see we roughly chopped up some potatoes, celery, carrot, parsley, and then added them to the Instant Pot, and then added some garlic and onion, making sure that we saved the food scraps to compost. And we actually made this recipe before the broth recipe, so these scraps were turned into veggie broth. And keep in mind that even if you don't have an Instant Pot, you could easily make this soup on the stove instead. From here, I added a can of roasted tomatoes for additional flavor, some leftover cooked lentils, oregano, onion flakes, salt and pepper, homemade veggie broth, and filtered water. I added a little bit more water because I wanted to make sure that all the veggies were completely covered so that everything would cook evenly. I feel like it can be so easy to forget about the last bit of produce that you have in the fridge at the end of the week, and making a simple soup like this and freezing it is so easy and can really extend the life of your food. 10 minutes in the Instant Pot and you could possibly have lunches for the upcoming week depending on how much produce you had lying around. Now let's talk about freezing in glass. This is really important. I like to use wide mouth jars when I freeze, and specifically jars that were made to go from very hot to very cold temperatures, like canning jars. Canning jars have a line on them that specifically says for freezing, and as long as you don't fill above that line, you won't have any issues. I definitely haven't anyway. Another thing to keep in mind is that when we were filling these jars with the soup, it was still hot so that we could film it for this video, but definitely don't put any jars in the freezer that have hot or warm liquid in them. Be sure to just leave them out on the counter without a lid until they're completely cooled before you freeze them.
So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and the 3 different recipes that we have here today on how to help preserve your food and also reduce your food waste.
And if you guys want more info on how to live a more sustainable life, especially things pertaining to the home, check out Christine's new book, Sustainable Home, available everywhere.
Yeah,
much,
on
right?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
It's a great book, so definitely check it out. And thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me over. I'm excited to eat.
Me too. We're so
We're
hungry. Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.
Perfect.
Yay.
Good. Okay, we did it.
All right.
Now we eat.